Hi guys, I'm Alina, your biology near-peer instructor. Today in this lecture, I'm going to be explaining the structure of the heart. So as you know, the heart is divided into four chambers. The upper two chambers are called the atria and the lower two chambers are called the ventricles. So the heart has two sides. There is the right side of the heart and there is the left side of the heart. There is the right atrium and the right ventricle on the right side, and the left atrium and the left ventricle on the left side. We must also know what are the important blood vessels which are entering into and leaving the heart. So the basic definition of an artery is a blood vessel which leaves the heart, and a vein is a blood vessel which enters the heart. So the two main veins that enter into the heart are the inferior vena cava and the superior vena cava. The superior vena cava brings blood from the upper parts of the body like the head, neck, etc., whereas the inferior vena cava, which you can see here, brings blood from the rest of the body to the heart. The inferior and the superior vena cava bring deoxygenated blood to the heart. That is the blood which is less on oxygen. So the blood enters the right atrium of the heart from these two vena cava, and then once it has entered into the right atrium, it is pumped into the right ventricle. As you can see, there is a valve between the right atrium and the right ventricle. This valve is called the tricuspid valve and it controls the flow of blood. Now the tricuspid valve is attached to the walls of the right atrium by means of cords which are called the chordae tendineae. So after the right atrium has contracted and the blood has entered the right ventricle, after a short pause, the right ventricle contracts and forces blood into the pulmonary artery. Now it's interesting to note that the blood, when the right ventricle contracts, does not flow back into the right atrium. Why? This is because of the tricuspid valve. Now, when the right atrium squeezes, this valve gets closed, and this prevents the backflow of blood into the right atrium. And the way it closes in this direction is because of the chordae tendineae. So the only way the blood leaves the right ventricle of the heart is via the pulmonary artery. As I said, arteries are those blood vessels which carry blood away from the heart. So although it is called an artery, but it carries deoxygenated blood. So as you can see, the pulmonary artery, it carries the blood from the right ventricle to the two lungs. So here, the pulmonary artery divides into this and this. It divides into two arcs. So one to the right lung and one to the left lung. So once in the lung, the blood gets oxygenated, and then after oxygenation, the blood returns to the heart via the pulmonary vein. The pulmonary vein carries the oxygenated blood. Now the pulmonary veins bring the blood into the left atrium, which is a pocket for, collecting blood. So once the blood has been collected in the left atrium contracts and the blood gets forced into the left ventricle. Once again, like the tricuspid valve, we have here the bicuspid valve. The tricuspid valve has 3 flaps, whereas the bicuspid valve has 2 flaps. And just like I explained how the backflow of blood is prevented from the ventricle into the atria, similarly in the left ventricle as well, the blood does not go back into the atrium when the left ventricle contracts because of this bicuspid valve, and the only way it leaves the left ventricle is through the aortic arc, also called the aorta. The aorta is the main artery which then supplies blood to all parts of the body. So as you can see here, the aorta divides into 3 vessels which then carry blood to the upper parts of the human body, and then over here, the aorta then branches downwards and then continues, and here it branches and provides blood to all parts of the body. So also now that I've explained the structure, also I will explain a few additional points. That is, always the walls of the ventricles are thicker than the walls of the atria, and the wall of the left ventricle is the thickest. Why is this so? This is because the ventricles have to force the blood out of the heart, whereas the atria just has to force the blood into the ventricles, and since they are just next to the atrium, this does not require a lot of force. But because the ventricles have to force blood outside of the heart, so they need to be thicker, and hence their walls are stronger and thicker. And the wall of the left ventricle is the thickest of them all because it has to supply blood to aorta, which then supplies blood to the rest of the body, whereas the right ventricle has to supply blood only to the lungs, which are a short distance away. Also, it's not shown in the diagram, but there are fibers over here which continue till the apex of the heart. This lower portion is called the apex, and then they continue here and here. Okay, so their function I'll explain in a while. So this region, it is a separation wall between the right ventricle and the left ventricle so that the blood does not get mixed. Okay, so now I will explain how the atria and the ventricles contract. Okay, so in the right atrium, there is a